So, the plan we built, the rest of the squadron performed like rock stars. Our guys stripped about 5,000 pounds off of our aircraft to make the math problem work, to include, we went with no guns, no armor.
Really?
We went
No,
naked.
yeah, no cure,
Nothing.
nothing at all.
Yeah. Me and a
What
co-pilot and two of our slimmest crew chiefs
can
to
you
make the
say?
math
What
work.
can you say? What part of Pakistan, or is that opposite?
Yeah, it was I think I can say it was Paktika province. It was out
Paktika,
pretty close to the border.
yeah, dude, with no guns.
Yeah.
You're nuts, dude. What's
Yeah.
wrong with you,
Yeah, we
dude?
had no
What?
guns, no armor, no anything.
I've been to
Yeah.
Paktika. I'm in Paktika quite
Yeah.
often. Yeah,
So
there's
we,
there's some Taliban
yeah, there
around
were.
there.
There were, for sure. I mean, and the task force is just there, obviously, snatching some bad guys. So we know this place we're going is
Yeah.
super dangerous.
Battle Line Podcast. Do not go anywhere. You are going to love this episode with Isaac G. Lee, author of Hangar 4, a combat aviator's memoir. And this is actually like the first of someone of his stature basically writing a book like this, which he'll explain during the interview.
Yeah.
I wanted to let you guys know that we are finally going to do a guest-free episode. It's been somewhere near a year next month. So if you have any type of question for us, send it over to battlelinepodcast@gmail.com. Also, if you're subscribed to our channels anywhere, you will see that we have new episodes that we're doing that we're calling the Annex episodes, which Chris named. And yeah, it's going to be a little different than this. This is where we do our spotlight interviews. This will be where we cover news, whether military related or entirely ridiculous.
This is our TMZ episodes for
yes.
Because back in the day, I was more into when the movie came. I was more vocal, more as far as just making fun of shit like Tano does. That's what Tonto does, and I do talk about myself in the third person. So eat shit out there, all right? But they're fun. I just got away from it. I didn't really feel like doing it. And you got to feel like doing those things. So they're not just rants of being angry. There's some humor into it. And like, I don't know. The humor came back, I don't know, a couple months ago, where I felt like starting to feel good again, feel like myself. And I was like, let's do this. And I was listening to some podcasts that did that. And I'm like, that's funny. I'm laughing them. Why aren't me and Ian doing that? Because we have that perfect dichotomy, which we're completely opposite, but we mesh well. We actually found our footing. Let's put that's what it was. We finally found our footing. It only took us 3 years, but we're fine. And it's like, let's do that, man. Because I used to have fun doing that. That's when I had like 300,000 people on Twitter following me, because I used to do that crap all the time. But it was a little bit more angry. I'll be honest, it was a little more angry and venomous, but it was still fun to poke fun, and that's what we're doing. We're poking fun. So listen to them. They're quick. They'll hit, laugh, yell at us if you want to. You can hammer us if you want to. I don't give a shit. That's what they're there for. But we're also gonna speak our minds and do our little TMZ rant for about 20 minutes, and that's it. And we'll do them as much as the Drudge Report will continue to give us great material. We'll continue to do our rants, our the Annex episodes. We'll do them.
Yeah. So before we get to Isaac Lee, call sign Whiskey, which we get into as well, got to talk about Bub's Naturals. They have so many great things. We normally talk about the collagen, but there's a lot more than just that. I mean, they have the best coffee out there, Bub's Brew. They also have the hydration packets, which, if you're drinking Gatorade and stuff like that, that's packed with sugar, this is so much better because it's coconut water.
Fountain of Youth is fantastic.
Fountain of Youth formula.
Yeah,
love everything that they do. So check them out. And then also they have a podcast out now. So you could give that a listen, actually, and that's the Cult of Recreationalism. If you've listened to our episodes with Sean Lake, he kind of talks about how Bub and him and their group of friends did start this thing called the Cult of Recreationalism, the Cult of Rec, where they would do things like go on skiing trips. And yeah, that's what Bub was all about. So Chris will actually be on there pretty soon as well.
24th.
So be sure to subscribe. And I don't know when it'll be posted, but at some point after that. So subscribe to them, the Cult of Recreationalism. But pick up any of that stuff that we're talking about. Collagen, MCT oil powder, hydration packets, Bub's Brew. It is all super high quality. Only at bubsnaturals.com. I shouldn't say only because you could find it elsewhere, but especially if you're a new customer, you're going to get the best deal through us for the first time. When you use promo code BATTLELINE, you'll get 20% off. You're also supporting Glenn Doherty Memorial Foundation. So check it out, bubsnaturals.com, promo code BATTLELINE.
From Kansas City to New York City, from planet Earth to extraterrestrial life in space, a podcast with no equal, engaged in unconventional warfare through your speakers and headphones. This is a show about embracing the suck, conquering your demons, and finding God in the face of adversity. Chris Tonto Peranto.
Switch is on. Motherfucker, I'm gonna shoot you in the face.
Ian Scotto.
You know, Ian and I have been dating for a long time.
You are now tuned into the Battle Line Podcast.
The Switch is on Battle Line Podcast. Very excited to have Marine Lieutenant Colonel Isaac G. Leon, combat aviator, served from 97 to 2017 in Iraq and Afghanistan. And most importantly, the author of Hangar 4, a combat aviator's memoir. I see that you've been doing the rounds with a lot of different podcasts. Chris is grabbing it off there. Actually, I was going to say, one of the cool things that I liked about this book...
I had to
I'm
grab
in the
it.
middle
I had to
of
grab it.
introducing
I got
this.
it. Right here,
All
right
right.
here. Sorry.
Well, one of the cool things I was going to say about this book is I do like that you had the glossary of terms in the back, which is there are many. And I think that, like, for the civilian who's into this stuff, you could just say, hey, refer back to this without talking down to the audience type of thing. I like the way the book was written. The book was very much, it's not sanitized. It's written exactly how you would expect a Marine to speak. And then the thing that I actually really liked about this book that was unique, that set things apart, that was of interest to me, is that you had the soundtrack for the book at the end of the book. And it was like, without shame, not a versatile playlist, because half the songs are Metallica. Which,
at least
like
half.
that's an appropriate soundtrack to war.
I
At
like,
least.
brother. I liked your it's like a Ranger handbook. You put it in your pocket, you know, one of them books, and then it just gets all worn because you just carry it with you.
Yeah.
So it has that worn look. But I like the playlist too. So let's get in the playlist. That's way more Metallica and all the headbanging. That's way more realistic.
It is appropriate. I'll tell you where that came from. So when I wrote the first draft of this book, I literally had a line from each one of those songs at the header of the chapter. And then when I got to the publishing process, publisher's like, hey man, you can't do that. You can't quote the actual lyrics.
They'll come after you, right?
Yeah,
Shit,
exactly.
yeah.
So they're like, you can only have the song title and the band. That's it. And so after I whittled it down to that, it just didn't look as cool at the top of each chapter. So I was like, you know what? After going back and forth with my editor, we just did a playlist, put it in the back. And I was like, if anyone's that interested, once they get to the back, they'll at least know kind of what I was listening to, what I was thinking. Because that really is like, it was my soundtrack for sort of this whole story.
What? And
I dig it. I dig because I am a Metallica fan. And actually, Chris is whipping out books here. This is the coffee table book of just the Master of Puppets tour, which is real. This just covers everything from like the whole tour of Master of Puppets, Cliff dying. I don't even know if you've seen this. It's like
I haven't seen
thick.
that book.
It's really cool, man. I have the glass jaw coffee table book back there, but like I love those because it's just something you can kind of skim through. But I am a mega fan. I mean, I saw over the summer Metallica do the whole stadium tour, which it's like, dude, what other band could play stadiums 2 nights in a row, not repeat the same song? So like the night that I went, you didn't see Enter Sandman. So there's like mainstream fans who are going, oh, like, why didn't they play Enter Sandman? But I think that's pretty cool. And the fact is, like, when you think about it, they're a band who hasn't had a hit in probably 25 years. And yet the brand has become bigger than it's ever been. Like the first time I saw Pantera, I'm wearing an Islander jersey, but was at Nassau Coliseum, their old home. And it's like all these years later, now they're playing stadiums. And I think the reason why is because there's guys your age who grew up with them. There's the younger guys my age who grew up with them. And then there's people, it's crazy to think that if you're a 13-year-old kid just getting into rock, that may be what your grandpa listened to, as crazy as that sounds.
Yeah, totally. I got turned on to Metallica when I was, I think, 13 by my best friend. And it was the Master of Puppets album, the cassette. he popped it in, and I was like, holy shit. It was mind blowing. And ever since then, I was hooked. And I actually just went last summer to the stadium tour. I went both nights at SoFi up in LA.
How good
It
was
was cool.
Pantera? How good
They
was
were great.
Pantera?
Yeah, the whole show was amazing. And I got to take my son for the first time. So that was really cool.
Oh,
too.
that's
so
cool.
cool.
Yeah, take him to
Yeah.
actually see some good music. So
Yeah, it was
the
cool.
and let me just be a hater here. I think that stuff is great because the crap that's out there now, like all the Swifties, no, you know, that is not music. So that is why they're still so damn popular, is because they're still real music that play their real instruments, that sing their real songs, and
I'm with you.
that's not today, man. I maybe and Ian knows music better than me, but even the guests that we've had on the show, whether it was Edsel Dope, whether it was, you know, Corey Taylor, of course, from Slipknot, of course, it's still people that play their music. It's still
Yeah.
people that actually, there, you know, and there is some argument, I know, with Edsel Dope, and they got in there with all the Ian knows it better than me, but still, when I listen to it, it still sounds like music, not some Taylor Swift bullshit that I can't stand. And when I was growing up, you know, when I was growing up, you know, she wasn't anything, and now she's this huge, and she hasn't changed at all, in my opinion. But man, when you look at the playlist and you look at that, man, you just think that was real music back in the day.
Yeah.
Weren't we lucky to, and we were lucky to go to war with Metallica and Def Leppard, and even I saw Depeche Mode on there. I used to listen to Coldplay, and people hate Coldplay, but Coldplay was still.
Yeah.
Well, I think you even, if I remember correctly, I'll have to look at it again. You even had like a Sheryl Crow song on there, right? Which I think
did.
it makes sense to have that on there because look, I've never been in combat. I'm not a veteran, but I can tell you this. When I'm lifting weights, right, I'm listening to a Muir and the Acacia Strain and the super heaviest stuff you could think of. And then I go in the sauna and I cool down and I listen to some like Gloria Estefan.
Yeah.
And I have no shame in saying that.
No,
Yeah.
Miami Sandwich, come on.
Yeah.
John Cicada and Gloria Estefan, whatever. You better not even be ashamed to say that. That shit's on my iPad, man.
The Sheryl Crow song is home. And every time I was coming home from a deployment, I would get that song stuck in my head. It was like clockwork. It would happen every time I was on the way home.
Did you have I had a home playlist. Did you have? Mine was Motley Crue, Blake Shelton, David Nail, another one, Home, and then when Jason Aldean came with Flyover States, it was that. And then Ozzy Osbourne, Mom, I'm Coming Home. I had that was my playlist coming home. It was that one.
Oh, so
one
it's all
many.
a home theme. I get it. I get it.
When you're flying back, when you're coming home, whether it's on a commercial or whether you're coming on a C-1, you know, you're coming on a DoD bird or you're coming on a private white CIA plane, playlist. But those were my 5 top ones, and then I fill it in with other things. But what was that one of yours? And I know you had more.
It was that one for sure. A couple of the others you mentioned, it was just like a total mind shift, right? Because it was like on the way to deployment, you're like getting amped up, you're in mindset, like it's all hard, it's all fast, it's all aggressive, and it was just like a way to ratchet it down. Like, okay, I'm going home, I need to kind of at least attempt to change the way I'm thinking, which I generally failed at, but I tried.
We try. You did, and you know, you guys did. Unlike the grunts, the guys on the ground, you guys really didn't have that forced. I call it a forced demobilization. No. You're like contractors. You're like when I was a contractor, you just came home and you're heading home. You're not doing all the psych and all that because. Now tell me why though. I never understood. Or is it because you're special pilots? Is that
no? Honestly, we should have been doing it. I wish they'd have done it for us because for us it was like one day you're flying and fighting, and then it's like 6 days later you're standing in a fucking grocery store going, "What happened to me? Like, why am I here? I don't want to be here. Like, I hate all these people. What's happening?"
Chris, I've heard you say the same analogy with a grocery store. For some reason, like that seems to, I guess, like trigger guys coming back in some way. Because you've said the exact same thing on the show where you've said like I go to the grocery store and it's like Captain Crunch and Lucky Charms and you're like I'm checked out.
I don't, and I want to hear your view on it because you're their guest on the show, but I'm going to give you my view first. But I went to the stores, grocery stores to me that was how great America was when I'm coming back from a deployment because there's food on the shelves. It's they've got the music, nice music playing. It's air conditioned. You know, everything about America that makes America great, you can find at least in the past at the grocery stores where you didn't get that overseas if you're allowed to even go into a grocery store if they had a grocery store. So to me, it was kind of bringing it down. But I was the same as you when I first would go in. It was. What do I get? Who gives a shit? I'll grab the Lucky Charms. I don't, But I don't know. What was your opinion? That's what I did when I got home.
It was the same. And actually, I put a little snippet about it in the book because this happened to me. I think it was the second time I came home from Iraq, but my wife was just like, hey, run to the grocery store and get whatever. I was like, yeah, no problem. And I got there and I walked in there, and within minutes, I was just like livid, pissed off, like at everybody. And there was no specific reason. I couldn't point at one thing and say, oh, I see this and this is bothering me. It was just like everyone's there minding their own business. And it just seemed like too nice, too tranquil. And what I was really thinking was, there's a war happening. Like I was just there, and none of you people in the store give a shit about that. Like you're oblivious to it.
Oblivious.
And that was the thing that was bothering me. And then I saw some lady literally at the register, like leafing through a National Enquirer, and the fact that she was like even looking at that and seemed like she gave a damn about it, just like made my head explode. I had to go sit out in the parking lot and like literally kind of come down for a few minutes. And then I went back in and got what I was, what my wife asked me to get. But it was like this weird out of body experience, because in the whole way I'm driving home, I'm like, what the fuck is wrong with me? Like something's wrong with me. But the way I was able to later describe it to people, coming home from deployment was always hard. And my analogy was, it's like you're playing a football game. It's the middle of the third quarter, the game's tied, and someone tells you, hey, not only can you not play anymore, you have to leave the stadium. You can't watch it on TV or listen on the radio. So you're just like trapped out there somewhere. You know this game is happening. You feel like you should still be in it, and you're not. And that it is the worst feeling in the world. And so that was always a bitch for me coming home, was coming down out of that mindset. Because
how long did it usually? It took usually me about 30 days, and then I had about 30 days till I went back out. So really, I only got 30 days where I felt halfway normal at home before I shot back out. How long did it usually take you till or did you ever? Some guys never do. They just until it's done.
I don't think I ever really did. I think once I kind of got into that combat mindset, I basically stayed there for a decade, a little over a decade. I mean, I would kind of pretend that I was normal, so to speak, at home, but you're sort of having this inner struggle the whole time where you can be sort of present, you can interact with your kids, you can be half-assed normal with your wife, but for the most part, it was just distracted, for lack of a better way to put it.
No, you're right. You're right. I guess I shouldn't say normal, but I was livable. I was someone you could live with. But I was always, because I do tell that to Ian on the show. Now that I'm home a lot, I do with the kids. I feel like I'm a father now. Where with my older kids, I never, even when I was home, I didn't feel that way. Where now I have an 8-year-old son, and I've been home for I haven't been overseas. Let's put it that way for most of his life. So I feel, but I get that. Yeah. That may, and you're still married to the same woman? I am. What the hell? What was she thinking then, dude? How did you manage that?
That is a great question. It is a great question. And I think she would probably say, like,
get her on,
hell,
man.
I don't know.
Go find her. I'm not asking her that.
She's like, I don't know. I will tell you, it was not easy for either of us, and still isn't. I mean, it was certainly extremely challenging at times. There was a lot to work through, and there were times where we went for 2 or 3 years and we were like living on 2 different planets. We were still married, and coexisting, but really both just totally on our own programs, which was challenging, especially when I did 3 back to back in Iraq, 2003, 2004, 2005. By the end of that, we were both smoked. And then I went to a B billet at the tactics school. And it took us almost that entire 3 years to kind of get back on the same page. And that was really at the point where I was deciding, am I going to continue and go to year 20, or should I punch out now? Because I was right around year 10. And I give her a ton of credit. It was actually her that said, you know what, you should stay in the Marine Corps. It's important, and we're still at war, and you're good at this, so you need to keep doing it, and we'll figure it out. And so from there, it was like, okay, that means another decade, another 2-3 deployments at least. And she was like, yeah, I know, we'll figure it out.
Veteran spouses and military spouses are the champions, man. My wife, we've had our struggles too, but she's been with me through. I got married to her and I went to Ranger School the next day. We still haven't had an official honeymoon yet.
That's awesome.
They have the most. They deserve the most respect, and to hear that that makes me smile. I know, and it also hurts my heart because I know how hard that is, because I went through that same kind of shit.
Yeah,
you're there, but you're not. And even when you are there,
Yeah.
you're not a good, we weren't, it's time to go back. The movie The Hurt Locker sucks. It's probably the worst, EOD guys do not do room clearing or sniping, except the end of it where he just feels like he needs to go back. That is the
Yeah.
spot that is correct. And so that's
Yep.
kind of that feeling. Yeah. Well, got into that, but honestly, the 203 to 4 to 5, it was hot and heavy in
was.
Iraq. People can read the book, but give us some snippets and story. And I just want your personal feelings, because again, on the ground, it's one thing.
Yeah.
When you're getting shot at, when you're up in the air and you're getting shot at too, it's a completely different thing. It is. Talk about it if you can. Well,
of course
you can. Shit, come on, man. I know you
yeah,
can.
absolutely. So, my timing was either, great or terrible, depending on your perspective. But I got to the fleet in December of 2000, motivated young lieutenant, obviously a few months away from 9/11, going my first deployment. And it's just like this huge adventure. We're working hard, playing hard,
Yeah.
trying to drink all the beer in Okinawa on the weekends. It's like it's amazing. And then 9/11 happens, and it was just like, oh shit, everything just changed. And we knew that it changed, and we were going to do something. We just didn't know what. And so it seemed like this endless spool up. Finally, go to Iraq in 03 to kick things off, and it was all just this unknown, this great unknown. And we had seemed like every Marine on the West Coast on Navy ships headed that direction. But it was cool because I'd been in the squadron long enough where I got to fly a lot. I was pretty involved. I was kind of like a mid-level guy in the squadron, so to speak, qual-wise. But I flew the initial insert on the first day of the war, lost an engine. We basically had a crash landing in the zone. I mean, it was nuts. But that was literally my first combat flight. Felt fortunate to survive.
Mechanical, or did you get it shot? Did something happen?
No, it was basically we were doing the insert into the port of Qasr, because we were trying to secure the port there, so they couldn't get anything out, and we could. But it was just your standard high, hot, heavy. We had a Marine recon team in the back with an IFAB, one of those little fast attack vehicles, some dirt bikes and stuff. So we were heavy, and we just ended up losing an engine, and then basically fell out of the sky. We just didn't have enough power, remaining for how heavy we were. And it resulted in what amounted to a crash landing in the zone. Thankfully, we got the hell out of there, but the aircraft was pretty jacked up. But we basically landed and inserted these guys into a firefight. So it's like, well, we're not going to stay here. So we just took off with 2 engines, got back to Kuwait, literally put some duct tape on a rotor blade that was jacked up, cargo strapped the main mount to the frame, and we're like, let's go back to the ship. And that was my introduction to combat flying. But that first deployment, it was pretty, I guess, standard tactically, right? We're fighting a conventional force in the Iraqi army and the Republican Guard, but it was a great initiation for me into combat. And then we came home. We were only home for a couple of months, and we got designated to go on another deployment. And at that point, supposedly the war was over. So we were just
this is
2004. So this is 2004. We got sent to Okinawa as part of the normal unit deployment program. But the whole time I was like, we're not going to Oki. We're going to end up back in Iraq. Like, just watching the damn news, you can tell what's going on and where we're getting all the word, of course, in the squadron. And sure enough, we got to Okinawa, and like 2 weeks later, our commanding officer's like, hey, we're taking these aircraft and going back to Iraq. So that's what we did. We loaded those aircraft up on C5s, went right back to Iraq. And that's when we took over Al-Assad from the army, which then became the big, major air base in Iraq and a huge logistical hub for all the U.S. forces. But it was mostly Marines living on Al-Assad. And we took that over. And that deployment seemed kind of slow because the primary war was over. We were transitioning to this counterinsurgency fight. But the truth is, we were still just, as a country, I feel like, in a whole force, just trying to get our shit together. No one really knew what to do almost. And, the generals were back here reading and, hey, how do we do this counterinsurgency thing again? They're dusting off some stuff from Vietnam. And meanwhile, all we were really doing in that deployment was setting up the battle space. So that was a lot of just logistics, moving stuff around. Where are we going to have FOBs? And as 53 guys, assault support, we haul ass and trash, we say. So we were very involved in that. And then towards the end of the deployment was when we started kind of getting things together and doing a couple of tactical missions, which was good. Came home from that deployment, got sent to the tactics school as a student. So at that point, I have every qualification you can have. You're supposed to know what the hell you're doing. Cool billet, though, for a senior captain to be the weapons and tactics instructor in the squadron. Went back to Iraq in 05, and that deployment was great because by then everyone had kind of figured out what was going on. There was a special operations task force down the street from us at Al Assad. Then they had, you know, the 160th, the Night Stalkers, organic to them, but the 160th was still so busy in Afghanistan, they didn't have their 47s. And as 53 guys, we have very similar capability.
Yeah.
So very early into deployment, those task force guys came over and talked to me and my buddy, who was also a captain, our other senior captain, just for an informal feasibility of support, see if we could work with them. And of course, we were like, hell yeah, we can do that. You know, not, you know, a couple of captains making a handshake deal, not ours to make, but you know, we rented up our chain, they rented up theirs, and then we got involved in helping them out and doing stuff with them. And that was awesome. Like that whole deployment, it was just game on. You know, we were doing stuff with the Marine Corps and we were doing stuff with the task force guys 1 or 2 nights a week. So it seemed like every other night we were out there chasing somebody or flying a raid or something cool.
Wow.
It was fun.
You know, and that 53, I did, I'm going to get off subject with Iraq a little bit because those 53s that you guys had, they're Pave Hawks, and we have Pave you guys they're Pave Hawks, right?
So
I mean, just so everybody knows.
Yeah, ours is called the Super Stallion. So slightly different variant. It's got a little more power, but not quite as much high speed gear that the Payload had.
And that's what Task Force, when I was at Ranger Battalion, but they were having some issues. A few were those Super Stallions because I know there was a couple crashes that were training crashes that happened, and it was because, and there was, I saw the documentary, and I don't know if it was some pissed off Marines or the pissed off crew chiefs on there. You never know on those documentaries, especially when they're HBO or because they're, they're slanted. They're slanted left. So I did want to ask you, because I watched the documentary and I watched, a couple of them crash, and now these crew chiefs came out of the works. All these things were always unreliable anyway, but I couldn't remember if they were the Super Stars. I knew they were Navy. And I knew they looked like 53s.
It's the Navy variant, which is essentially the same aircraft, but a slightly different and configured for a totally different mission profile.
So I don't know but was it foolish? I know you can't talk a lot about it, but I really, it kind of pissed me off. Special because no way, dude. It's just got to be horse shit. There's these birds. I've never seen them go down. I love flying in the 53. So
I would say that the 53 Echoes that I flew were very damn reliable and just a well-built machine. Redundant systems. You can just beat the shit out of those things and they keep on going. I mean, we thrashed those planes. We flew the hell out of them, and all the credit in the world to our maintenance Marines that kept those things running. But they were great aircraft, and our Marines kept them up, and we flew the hell out of them, for a good 20 years straight in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Well, yeah, they were taking some heavy fire, and I'm glad you said the maintenance guys, because they do deserve a ton of credit. Those guys, unbelievable. I know I'm getting off subject, Ian, but
no, it's all good.
I just remembered, I got Isaac on. I got to ask him because that special pissed me off a little bit. It's like, I don't know. But going back to Iraq and 04. The Marines were. I was a Blackwater with 04, so we were basically. It's like you guys are the guinea pigs. We don't have any intel. Just go run these streets, and we'll figure out where the bad. And we were getting hit constantly. But I do remember Anbar province. Yeah, the Marines were getting hammered in Fallujah.
They were.
How did that feel? I mean, you're kind of on the sidelines. I mean, from what you just said, how did that feel? Or you're like, man, we need to get in this fight. Or how do you get in the fight? Because it is urban. What do you do?
So for that second deployment in 04, and this was also just kind of that time and place in the Marine Corps. At the time of the Marine Corps, we still had CH-46s, which was a medium lift helicopter. And they were older than the 53, and they were considered to be better in a high threat environment. And honestly, part of that was literally just because they carried less people, right? So I mean, as an assault support pilot, you are a strategic target for the bad guys. They were just less of a strategic target. You carried 12 dudes, not 24. But they also had some armor and some other things that helped them out. So they did a lot of that. But then as the war kind of progressed, we started realizing, I would say as a force, that there was some efficiency gained by using a 53 instead, because I can get twice as many people in there. Now I can take 2 aircraft instead of 4. It's a math problem. And at the end of the day, it just depends on, whoever's signing off on this, how much risk are they willing to accept and where. But we got more and more involved over time. And then eventually later, like when I went to Afghanistan in 2011, at that point, the Marine Corps has totally phased out the 46 and transitioned to the MV-22. And then the opposite was true. The 53 was considered, more expendable perhaps than the V22. And so we were doing all of that stuff, and the V22s were sort of in the periphery. But it was interesting to watch all that evolve over the course of, several years and several deployments.
Sure. I bet you're at 2005. You're like, finally, it's like game start where we don't have to just sit and watch everything on the sideline. Because that would have been hard, because they were kick. I mean, and they were learning on the ground too. And I say they because I was a contract, but we were running a lot of those areas, and that's when we lost Helveston. We got hung from the bridge in Fallujah the year before. So and we could have used a lot of, in fact, we requested a lot of helicopter, and then State Department wouldn't give them to us. We're like, we need this, and this. Nope, you're not getting it. And we'll throw some ballistic blankets on the side of your Suburbans, and you're good to, you're good.
Yeah.
You're good to go.
Well, at the time, I think it was like the terms were red zone, black zone. And if it was a black zone, which Fallujah was, for a 53 to go in, like a general had to sign off on it.
Gotcha.
Like it was at that level. So shit would have had to go real sideways for the 53s to go in there. But it was maddening, because we're flying around all around there. Like I remember we'd fly down to Taqadum, which we called TQ, which was just a few miles from Fallujah. I'd always, throw the fires net into my scan plan just to listen to what was going on over there. And, you'd look over there on MVGs, it looked like a strobe light from everything that was happening. But we were just sort of watching the show from the sidelines. So it was cool in 05 to get more involved.
That's cool. And those birds are intimidating as hell. I love them. I saw a picture of me fast roping out of one where the ropes like this because of the wash. Your guys, the wash. I hated fast roping out of them, but I loved it. But just when they would fly over, it's like a mean sperm whale, literally sperm whale coming at you. It's badass.
Yeah, it was cool. And then 05 was cool because there were so many players at that point. There were Army National Guard unit there that was actually pretty good. So we did some work with them. We were working with the Marines, the task force guys. So it was this cool, like, who do we have this week? Who's on tap tomorrow night, the next night? And to get to work with everybody and all the players was really neat.
Hey guys, hope you're enjoying this episode with Isaac G. Lee, call sign Whiskey. Before we continue, Fort Scott Munitions is a manufacturer of multi-federal patented solid copper and brass CNC spun ammunition. It's designed to tumble upon impact in soft tissue, leaving devastating wound channels for faster bleed out and quicker incapacitation. This ammunition was originally developed to innovate and improve on the standard of military-grade ammunition design. It was found that not only did the TUI ammunition outperform competitors in the self-defense industry, but it quickly became apparent that it would be a top contender for hunters alike. With the ammunition being CNC spun, the tolerances are some of the tightest on the market, ensuring that you receive the same results with each pull of the trigger. Fort Scott Munitions is available throughout dealers in your state, but you'll get the best deal through us when you go to fsm.com. Use the exclusive promo code BattleLine for 15% off your order, only available to listeners of the BattleLine podcast. Fort Scott Munitions is a proud supporter of Chris Peranto, BattleLine Tactical, and the BattleLine podcast. fsm.com, promo code BattleLine for 15% off. We also have the best night vision sponsor out there. And you were just there in Pennsylvania speaking with the crew over there at Photonis, and they're the best at what they do.
Photonis Defense makes the best night vision goggles on the planet, period. And
yeah, absolutely.
That's all that needs to be said right there.
Yeah, so check them out, guys. Now you can have the superpower to see in the dark with the Viper Binocular Night Vision System by Photonis Defense, which is the global leader in night vision solutions, providing more high-quality night vision capabilities than anyone. Military, law enforcement, and public safety end users utilize Photonis Defense solutions to give them the edge at night in tactical situations and rescue operations. Hunters, shooters, boaters, and enthusiasts can rely on the Photonis Defense Viper Binocular to become masters of darkness. The new Viper Binocular system carries the same features and benefits as the Photonis Defense Viper Monocular, with a ruggedized body, and harnesses the power of the Echo Intensifier tubes, giving you sharper images, reduced halo, and industry-leading ultra-fast auto-gating across the range of dynamic operating conditions. You just heard Tonto. This is what he uses. This is what Phil Otto uses, who's been on the podcast. So check them out. PhotonisDefense.com. PHOTONIS defense.com, photonisdefense.com for more information, or look for Photonis Defense product options from your night vision dealer. Check them out. And now back to this interview.
Ian, jump in whenever, bud.
Yeah,
Because
well,
I got
actually, you
tons
know
of
what?
questions. I won't shut up. You got to
Yeah,
keep,
no,
you
it's
got to
fine.
catch me off.
I was actually just thinking of, like, with all the guests that we've had on, we've had guys who I think have probably had 20 years old, but a lot of them were in the military for a certain amount of time, then became contractors. So the thing that's really fascinating with your background, I think, is like you served in the military under Clinton, under Bush, under Obama, and then at the very end under
Yeah.
Trump. Like, for people who wonder from the outside, like, how much of a difference does it make to you
Yeah.
who the commander in chief is? Like, being, in the Marines throughout all these different administrations.
And
Like,
you
was there
can
any time
say
that sucked, or that you felt like you were unleashed?
say whatever you want to, because we do. I want to hear it.
Yeah,
I want to
no.
hear it, man.
Well, I would say I got a little bit, I don't want to say biased, but kind of early in the Bush administration, right? Because there was a lot of questioning about whether we should be there or not. And my personal opinion at the time, and still to this day, was kind of like, who gives a shit? Like, whoever's in office, they said to be here, so we're here. So this is what we're gonna do, and that's all that matters. And
Yeah.
and I really
Which, by
took
the
that
way, I feel like
mindset
it gets
on.
lost sometimes on civilians that, like, yeah, you guys have nothing at all to do with the foreign policy.
No,
So
zero. Zero. I mean, I volunteered for it. I signed up for it. You want me to be in Iraq? I'm going to be in Iraq. I'm going to
And it's
the best
fun.
I can.
And I've told guys, I'm you may hate me, but I was having fun. I liked it. So I kept going back.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it. I
For
did.
sure. There wasn't a single time where I was like, oh my God, we shouldn't be here. What's the administration doing? This is bullshit. Like that. I thought that zero times ever. And honestly, I'll tell you, I remember at one point I was asked by a family member on the other side of the family, like, oh, aren't you upset? And I was like, fuck no, I'm not upset. Like, I'll go back again tomorrow. Like, what, that's what they need us to do. That's what I signed up to do. And frankly, I like doing it. I mean, I'm probably a little crazy, but I like it.
Well, you kind of have to be crazy to do
Yeah.
what you've done. So you were saying that was how it was with the Bush administration. Was there any administration where you felt like your hands were tied? Even pre 9/11 under Clinton, you always hear all those stories about people kind of being paid not to serve, all different types of
Yeah,
crazy
well,
stuff.
I would say when I came in, it was Clinton, and it was kind of hard to get in just because there'd been a drawdown, no one wanted pilots, it was a little challenging, but once I found my way to the Marine Corps, that worked out, and that was all good. But I was so boot when he was in office that I was kind of oblivious to how whatever they were doing in the White House, if it was affecting me, I had no idea, right?
Yeah.
I was just trying to get through training and do the best I could, not look like an idiot. And then we transitioned to 2 terms of Bush, and it was just like balls to the wall and war. And I always felt like he took good care of us. I mean, our pay raises seemed like they were good
What's that?
during that time, and
The
all
money,
that stuff.
finance always seems better, at least when a Republican's in office. We get what we want. We have
For
what we
sure.
need. We have.
Yeah.
I mean, that's my opinion. But yeah,
For
sorry about that.
sure. No, good. And then, I was basically out of the fight from 06 to 09 when I was an instructor at the tactics school. So I wasn't super tied into how things were trickling down. Like, we at that school, that is the premier aviation weapons and tactics school for the Marine Corps. So we certainly got all the resources we wanted or needed to do what we needed to do. So, nothing was affecting me. And then when I went back to Afghanistan in 2011, though, my timing for that was kind of great. Also, went back in January of 11, and we were there right when Obama was like, "Hey, let's go. What do you guys need?" And kind of ramped up, the support, and we changed the ROE a little bit and got more kinetic and a little more aggressive. And that was actually cool timing for us because we happened to be there at that time, early in that deployment. The 160th got themselves into a pinch out on the Pakistani border. They rolled an aircraft over. We went to get it. And that was a crazy ass mission, but I actually got to plan and lead and execute that one myself. But after we did that, they were getting so many requests for all the stuff that was going on. They couldn't field them all. And because we, sort of proved we weren't idiots by helping them out of a jam, they started giving us their overflow stuff. And so in that deployment, I think we ended up doing 144 named operations, which for a 53 squadron was totally insane. Like, we had done, I think, 68 and 05 in Iraq. And I remember thinking, no squadron's ever going to do more named ops no 53 squadrons are going to do this many named ops like ever again. And then we more than doubled it in 2011 in Afghanistan. But it was because we had that early relationship with the 160th and helped them out, and they started giving us all their overflows. So, and I'll never forget the night they flew the Bin Laden raid, we were flying another raid they had given us. And I was joking with this. I had a captain, weapons tactics instructor that worked for me, great dude, Teddy Hart. And we were laughing about, like, I wonder what the fuck those guys are doing that they gave us this. And so we go do this raid, and we think we're all high speed and cool, and come back to the squadron. We're like, yeah, it was awesome. Walk back into the building, and everyone's freaking out, like, dude, they got Bin Laden. And me and Teddy both looked at each other like, that's what they were doing tonight.
Yeah, just walk out, just walk out.
Yeah,
Hopefully
I
nobody
was
saw
just like,
nobody
man.
saw us. Let's go out. the
Yeah,
back
I was
door.
like, dude, we thought we were cool for about 5 minutes. Not that cool.
but that's one thing you did. You working with TF, or when you work with special operations, you do have money. You do have this resources that you, and I bet aviators, especially you guys, are always, and you need it. You need to have it. I want you guys to have the resources. That means they're pulling stuff from us, so you guys get it. Fuck yeah, that's that. Yeah, that CSAR mission though, you just kind of briefly touched on.
Yeah.
Can you touch on a little, because those CSAR missions are cool as
yeah,
shit,
it was awesome.
Can you
man.
touch on
it
that
was
a little
awesome.
bit more?
Yeah, I'll tell you.
And what is the acronym, so I don't have to go into.
So I'll tell you, we call it a trap, tactical recovery of aircraft and personnel.
I CSAR, combat search and rescue. If you're a
Yeah.
ranger, it's like CSAR. We're going on a CSAR. They call it something else, but it's combat search and rescue.
Yeah.
It's
See, this is why I'm on the podcast.
Yeah.
Though. It's
Yeah.
the average civilian.
It's
Is like,
good.
what are you guys talking about?
No, it's good. So yeah, so I was the operations officer for the squadron. So I was a major, just come from the tactics school. So I was about, as proficient as I was going to be, at all of this stuff. I just happened to be in my office, and I was on what we called the morning shift, where we'd work, from like 9 p.m. to like 6 or 7 in the morning, and you basically fly all night, until the sun came up. And that's usually where we did all the named operations. So I'm in my office. I get a call from higher headquarters, and there was a lieutenant colonel worked up there, cool ass guy. His call sign was Sniper Larry Brown, and he's like, "Hey man," he's like, "I got a hot one for you, and your boss isn't gonna like it." So right away I know, like, whatever this is gonna be like a high risk and crazy, right? So he starts telling me, he's like, "Hey, the Army, they rolled a CH-47 over out on the Pakistani border. Can you guys go external it, get it out of there?" So I'm asking him some basic questions, because it's really, the initial feasibility support's a math problem. Can we literally physically pick this thing up? And it's a math problem: altitude, strength of the aircraft, time of day, temperature, all the things. So I'm like, hey, yeah, give me a basic weight and a grid, and I'll get back to you. So he gives it to me, go run initial numbers, call him back, and I'm like, yeah, I think we can do it, but we're gonna have, if we can make all these things happen, maybe. So we start working on it. Basically, we work on this plan all night, come up with the final answer of, yes, we can do it, but I wasn't going to have a power margin, meaning like zero margin for error on this lift to pick this thing up. And oh, by the way, in the course of the night, we discovered that not only is this a 47, but it's a 47 Golf, and now those only belong to the Task Force 160, the Night Stalkers. So I'm looking at this grid, I'm looking at the imagery of where this thing is, and those guys have actually gear on their aircraft that help them with reduced visibility landings. We don't. So I already know this zone's going to be varsity, because those guys are the best in the world, and they rolled it. And my dumb ass is going to go try to hover and pick them up, right? So the degree of difficulty on this thing is kind of stupid before we even start. But we really wanted to give it a shot. We ended up briefing our commanding general the next morning. I told him, yeah, hey sir, we can do it. Here's the numbers. I won't have a power margin, but let me give it a shot anyway. And he didn't like it. So I left his office not knowing if we were a go that night or not. And but we set everything up like we were going, just because it was easy. It would be easier to turn off than turn back on. Head back to, get something to eat, go finally crash at, I don't know, noon or something. I was trying to go to sleep. I couldn't sleep. I was too keyed up. I ended up sleeping about 3 hours, and before my guys came and got me, and were like, hey, you guys are going. And at the time I think it was Petraeus who was in charge of everything out there, basically usurped our commanding general. Was like, no man, your guys are going to go give it a shot, right? And we were ecstatic. I was pumped. Like, I totally wanted to go. So, the plan we built, the rest of the squadron performed like rock stars. Our guys stripped about 5,000 pounds off of our aircraft to make the math problem work, to include, we went with no guns, no armor.
Really?
We went naked.
Yeah, no cure, nothing at all.
Yeah, me and a co-pilot and 2 of our slimmest crew chiefs to make the math work.
Can you say what part of Pakistan, or is that opposite?
Yeah, it was I think I can say it was Paktika province. It was out
Paktika-
pretty close to the border.
Yeah, dude, with no guns?
Yeah.
You're fucking
Yeah.
nuts, dude. What's
Yeah.
wrong with you,
Yeah. We
dude?
had no
What-
guns, no armor, no anything.
I've been to
Yeah.
Paktika. I went Paktika quite
Yeah.
often. Yeah,
So
that's there's
we,
some there's some Taliban
yeah,
around there.
There were, for sure. I mean, and the task force is just there, obviously snatching some bad guys. So we know this place we're going is super dangerous. And I was like, yeah, I'll do it. Do it. So we stripped no guns, no armor, no nothing. Got our aircraft stripped down. So we were light enough to make the math work. We took my aircraft. We had a flying backup that was configured the same. Our commanding officer flew that one. And then we had a third aircraft that had some maintenance Marines because we had a staging point nearby where we had to strip our auxiliary fuel tanks off our aircraft. That was the last thing. We needed aux tanks to get there, but we needed them off to do the lift. But short version is it was about 24 hours from first phone call to take off. And at sunrise that next morning, I was hovering over that 47 and we got that sucker out of there.
And you're doing it at the day. You're doing you said sunrise. So
yeah, we did it. We did it right at sunrise because that's literally the coldest time of the day. So it makes you have maximum lift. It was about aerodynamics. Gotcha. So we flew out there at night on MBGs, flew into the zone on MBGs, and right as the sun's cracking the horizon, flipped the goggles up, get over the load, and went for it.
My asshole would have been puckered as soon as that sun come up. I would just like, there's going to be AK-47 and Dishka fire coming right now. Here it comes.
Well, thankfully, it was actually the Rangers who secured the zone the night before, so I knew we at least had a perimeter.
That's what we did. That was one of our things. So okay, you're good. You got it, man.
I knew once I got to the zone, I was all right for a couple of minutes. They had a little perimeter there.
I'm gonna tell you right now, they were cussing your fucking ass out though, because they're freezing. They're sitting out.
Probably.
If I was out, I'd be there saying, "Where's that son of a bitch? I'm freezing out here, just laying in the prone in this fighting position, blocking this goat path. Something's in." I know. I guarantee you. But as soon as we see you coming and you do it, it's like, he's off. We're good.
It was cool as hell. But it was such an eerie scene. I'll never forget it because right like in front of the zone, there was one of those Afghan graveyards that had the grave markers with those like sticks with the flags on them. It's the creepiest shit you've ever seen in your life. So like you're sitting in the aircraft, I'm about to do the thing. I'm looking at this, creepy ass graveyard, and it's just like, what am I doing here? It's like this, you have these moments of clarity where you're like, this is nuts, but it's kind of cool. So let's do it.
That sounds so cool. Did you get any? I know, but I wish we would have the cell phones back in the day, like what the kids do now. But did you get any good pictures from that, man? Did you take? We
actually do. We had
that's awesome.
Pictures. We actually the Marine Corps sent combat camera with us. We actually got good pictures of it.
That's sweet.
But it was pretty neat. Like when it was over, of course, very quickly we got word from the Army, like, hey, you can't release those pictures, and here's all the rules, and we got a couple of awards that were very sanitized, and hey, it's all good though. It was cool.
Man, and by the way, that's one thing I really like about the book that you say at the beginning, where you say, unless you absolutely had to, you were like, these are the actual names of the guys that I served with. These are the exact places. And you were like, if there's a pseudonym, it's because it had to be, basically. And one thing I wanted to ask you about that, call sign Whiskey. What's the story behind that?
Short version was I was a total liberty risk, especially when I was younger. And I got popped for drinking on a Navy ship, which is a huge no-no. But it was
what else you got to do, dude? What else is there to do but drink on a ship?
It was literally the day that Bush landed on the carrier and said we won OIF, and we had a Steel Beach picnic on the ship, which is you have a beer day, which everyone gets 2 beers, but it's not. Let's say that's enforced loosely. And then of course everyone's secret stashes started to come out, and I just happened to be one of the fortunate few that managed to get pinched by the Navy. And but hey, it was a mistake. I definitely got my ass handed to me a little bit over that one, but got a cool call sign out of it, so it ended up being worth it in the end.
And that's a cool tie-in, actually, that the connection we made of you coming on the show is that you're a friend of Brett Crozier. He was on about a year ago, episode 192. Chris wasn't on for that episode, but I mean, that's really a great guy. And I think when you speak about people who have great ethics and people who are going to do the right thing no matter what, like the fact that he spoke about it on the podcast, that he lost his job because during COVID, he basically said, I'm not going to enforce this because there is no social distancing on a Navy ship. It's just not possible. And he said how he felt, lost his job for it. And Yeah, I mean that's a guy who truly has integrity, I feel like.
Yeah, he's an awesome guy. He and I serve on the board together of a nonprofit here in San Diego.
Oh
So it's
wow.
always a
That's
pleasure when I
cool.
get to spend some time with
What,
Brett.
but
He's just a great dude.
how does ethics and whiskey drinking too much and being a liberty risk, and Brett has ethics? Are we just talking about the
So-
No, because I
opposite?
said
Is
because you
that the
said
He
connection?
tolerates
Navy
me.
and
Oh.
Navy ship. That's because you did it on a Navy ship. That's how I tied
God,
it.
man, that's
But
Yeah.
that
and the
could,
other
it
thing
could be a tight end. They opposites attract, man. Brett's got a
Yeah.
ton of ethics and does everything right. Whiskey's like, dude gives a shit.
I,
I'm gonna drink,
I
man.
was a little bit of a limit pusher, which was a superpower in some ways and detrimental in others.
you
It's
know what stood
good.
out about that interview to me though was so his book is Surf When You Can, and
Yeah.
and he's very big on surfing. Of course, you guys both living there in San Diego. But the thing that there's like always something from these interviews that really stands out to me and that I take from my life was that when he was talking about his love of surfing and all that, and I said something about the work-life balance and how it was important to him. And he was like, no, it's life work balance. Life should always come first before work. And I thought that was I just got a lot out of that. So it was cool that
Yeah.
he hooked us up with you because yeah, I could
Yeah.
see the friendship there, and cool guy, very cool
Yeah,
guy.
for sure. Yeah, it was definitely him. He was like, "Hey, yeah, you should definitely reach out to these guys. They're a good time." And I'd listened to the show before too, so I was like,
Oh,
"Yeah, sure,
That's
thanks,
I'll send it
awesome.
man.
to him. See how it goes."
Did he
Thank you.
was he one of the people who encouraged you to write a book? Because it's funny when I first started doing. I mean, it's crazy. Time flies by because I've been doing this for 11 years in terms of just interviewing military veterans. And I remember 11 years ago, it was mainly Navy SEALs putting out books. You know, that
Yep,
was the main thing.
it
And
was.
now it's kind of everybody.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
there's also not this stigma. I mean, I
Yeah.
worked with Brandon Webb, and I know there was some controversy with him with in terms of like was everything accurate. But I'll be honest, I think some of that controversy was just a lot of people being like, you should be a quiet professional, you shouldn't write a book. And now I don't agree with that. And if people do feel that way and that's their own standard, I get that. But I don't think you should discourage other guys from writing books. And I think everybody has like their own story to tell. You know, your book is unique, just
yeah.
like Chris's book is unique. So yeah, I was wondering what did encourage you to put out a book? And at one point, did you say, I'm okay with this. I'm comfortable writing a memoir and exposing these parts of my life. I
Uh,
mean, you have a chapter on addiction.
yeah.
You expose when you put out a book like this, you do expose a lot about yourself.
For sure. No, actually, I was well underway when I met Brett. He and I met after we were both out of the military. I think literally just a couple of years ago, and so I was already in process on all of this. But really, what it was for me was I kept a journal the entire time I was in the Marine Corps, which is an odd thing to do, and I can't even tell you why I started it. But I started at OCS just because I thought the drill instructors were like the funniest people I'd ever seen in real life. Like I used to get my ass chewed for laughing all the time. But I started just writing stuff down because I was like, oh, this is so awesome. I'm never going to remember it if I don't. Well, I just never stopped. And so I kept doing it. And I found that writing was kind of a decompression exercise for me. And I was always trying to find ways to say, let the air out of the balloon, you know, aside from like having a six pack, of course. But you're having a PT, I'm gonna work my ass off, I'm gonna do all this stuff. But what else healthy can I do? So like writing in this journal felt like this kind of healthy thing I could do was helpful for me. Well, so by the time I transitioned out of the Marine Corps, I'm a nerd. So this thing's super organized, it's all electronic, and I had it, but it was just kind of sitting on my computer and I hadn't thought about it. And really what happened was I sort of had this idea like, well, maybe I should turn this into a book. But I'll be honest, for at least a year, I was walking around like, dude, who the hell are you to write a memoir? No one cares. You're an assault support pilot, you know, go pound sand. Like, what do you do? What are you thinking? That was the voice in my head. And then what happened, if to be totally honest, was in 2021, I started hearing just more and more stories about guys that I knew that had gotten out, you know, transition out, were having all kinds of issues, you know, substance abuse, marital issues, just couldn't hold down a job. Guys are struggling. And to be honest with you, I was navigating some of that myself. And so I'm like, I know what's wrong with them. So you're trying to reach out to guys kind of individually, trying to help, just trying to be a good friend, trying to be a buddy, if you will. And then one day that just kind of became my why. I was like, you know what? Maybe I should just share this story. And if I do this in a really honest way, maybe in some way it'll be at least a tiny bit helpful to
Yeah.
somebody. If nothing else, maybe they'll be like, hey, I can identify. There's at least one other dude out there that has had a similar experience and struggled with some of the same things. So once I kind of had that as my why, then I was like, all right, I'm doing it. And then I just really just sat down and started jamming on it. And it was really call it a spare time project, at night, on the weekends, whatever. Spent most of 2022 doing it, and then started chopping around for publishers. Ultimately decided I want to go with a hybrid publisher because the standard publishers I talked to all wanted me to like chop a bunch of stuff out of it, make it more about your wife. They just had these opinions that I didn't want, I didn't like, frankly. I felt like if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it my way. And so I found a hybrid publisher that was excited about doing it, and then, signed on with them. Then the only real delay was I had to send it to the Pentagon. There's an office there, the DoD Office of Pre-Publication Security Review. It took them about 7 months to go through the whole manuscript and send it back to me. And thankfully, I mean, they had me redact some things, but it was mostly just little details, nothing that materially affected the story. And then once that was done, we were off to the races. So from there, it was balls to the wall. But I'll say the person I give probably the most credit to is my wife, because I did this in a really brutally honest way. And I talk about the home part of it too, and how hard that was. And so, I think she reluctantly got on board initially. And I think she feels okay about it now. Although, I'm not going to lie, like a week and a half ago, right when this thing was about to launch, we were kind of sitting there like, no, anyone who wants to is going to know our business here in about a week. But I still felt like it was important to include that, just so that whoever reads this sees the totality of the experience, right? Because you're juggling this life where you live on two different planets. On one, you're this warfighter guy and you love it and you're kind of addicted to it. And you start thinking you're crazy because you like it so much. And at the same time, you're supposed to go home in the suburbs in San Diego and try to act like just a normal dude. Like it's almost impossible. But I really wanted to paint that picture of that's the reality of it. And I committed early in the process to do this because I had the journal. I'm able to give the perspective that I had at each individual point in the story, even if I now look back at that perspective and think like, oh man, you were wrong, or you were screwing that up. But to me, that made the whole thing really honest. So you can see that development, you can see where I screwed things up, you can see where I was being an asshole. But you see that whole track from clueless, motivated co-pilot to, senior captain who thinks he's a badass and turns into a smart aleck. And now I'm a major and I hate myself because I always hated majors, to holy shit, I'm the CEO of the squadron. How'd this happen, right? You get to see that whole, you get to go on that whole ride with me. And so I just wanted to do that in a really honest way. I knew I was taking some risk in doing that. I'm sure I will hear something from somebody at some point about how I should have made it sound more like a commanded staff paper, but I just didn't want to do it that way.
No, you have to have relatability. If you don't, then those that haven't served don't pick up the snippets, the leadership, the honesty, the integrity, the ethics, the learning. And you just said it right there. And I know I'm the same way. I know everybody that's come on the show that's been in the community, whether aviators, special operations, has said the same thing. How many times we've screwed up? Yeah, I mean, that's what we do. The only difference between us, and if you want to say it's a difference, it's not, is that every time we screw up, we're like, okay, well, we'll just try it again. But we screw up, and that's the beauty, and that's the relatability, and you need that in there. Yeah, you don't need to be Admiral McRaven saying everything's right, because Admiral McRaven, I know, has screwed up 8 million. Everybody has, but no, I want to know, what did he do wrong? Maybe I've done that wrong. Well, how did he get through it? Well, then I can do this too. And I've learned that on the speaking tour, how I've had to do that is do it, not necessarily writing, even though the Ranger Way is kind of like that. I just wrote about all my screw ups. Like I fucked up. Okay. But that you're helping people because you're honest, and that's tremendous. And I don't know many 05s that are willing to do that, which says a lot about you, brother. That says you're humble right there. You're an 05 and did you make 06? Did you make 06? You made
No, actually I pulled my name and went ahead and transitioned out right when I was on the cusp of that.
Well, maybe that's why this is so honest. If you would have made 06, they would have sent you to a command college and they would have got that right out of you.
That is definitely what was going to be the next step. That was the next step for me.
But it is, I am glad that you're honest and you are how you are, and you're helping to just help the end. And it doesn't have to be military. I get with people, militaries, you don't have to, we're not just doing stuff for the military, but we do have to find some relatability to everybody else. And by saying the addictions and the marriage problems, and we have the same things that everybody else does, in fact, and sometimes even more. This is how we get through them, and it can't help it. It can't help. But Man, I wish you're one. I think back all the time, man, I wish I would have taken a journal from day one with the drill sergeant. So that was brilliant. Man, that you're like one in a million, man.
It worked out. I'm glad that I did. I could have never written this if I had not done that. I mean, that was literally the source material. But I'll tell you, the hardest part about writing it, especially in the early stages, was I would sit down and be like, okay, I'm gonna write for 2 hours. 2 hours go by, and I was just reading the journal, and it was like, oh, I forgot about that. Forgot about this. I mean, it was awesome. I mean, there was all these little tidbits and details that I would have never remembered if I hadn't had them in there.
Hey, that's actually a good
that's
thing
awesome.
to mention for as I said, there's so many guys putting out books now, but I'd say there's even more guys who have similar stories to both of you who say one day I'm going to write a book and they never do. Like, how would you encourage them to
Yeah.
actually do this? Because I'll give one word of encouragement as a guy who hasn't written a book. But when you talked about going with the hybrid publisher and doing it the way that you wanted to do, I don't want to call it out because it's almost like embarrassing. But we've had guys on the show who don't know the first thing about putting out a
Yeah.
book. They Google how to put it out, and some, Airfingers publisher asks them for money
Screws
and
them
puts
over.
out their book. Yeah, and totally screws them over. Like we've
Yeah.
had guys on the show like that. So yeah, what advice would you give for someone who just has the idea in their head, I lived this incredible military life, or even they just I want to get it out there. How do they do it?
Yeah, to me, the best way to go, and this is really what I did, is there's enough military guys who've written books, is they're easy to find and ask them because those are the guys that'll give you the best gouge, right? Like, because it's a community and everyone cares about each other and everyone takes care of each other. And I totally believe that. And even if it's some guy that you don't know that you're looking at like, oh man, that guy's famous, I'm not going to bother him. Those guys they'll help you. I mean, just basic advice like, hey, how did you do this? And so I knew a few guys who had written books, a couple of Cobra pilots, of course, the shooters, those guys are cool. And then, but no assault support pilot in the Marine Corps had written a book since like Vietnam. I think
Oh
Bonnie
wow.
Sue was
Wow,
the
I didn't
last
know that.
one.
Yeah, I didn't know
Yeah,
that.
no
Oh,
assault support guys have.
oh.
So, a couple of the 160th guys have, of course, and they're kind of in their own class, but Marine Corps assault support hadn't been done. And there hadn't been a book written by a 53 pilot about flying in combat ever. So I kind of knew like, hey,
Wow.
there's a little niche here of something that hasn't happened, which also made it important to me because I kind of felt like by proxy, I'm sort of telling the story for the 53 community about what we did for those 20 years. But it was really just ask other guys who've done it. You get the best gouge that way. They won't steer you in the wrong direction. And from there, I was able to kind of navigate and find my way to some good options. I also honestly reached back out to a couple of the professors that I knew at the Marine Corps Command and Staff College in Quantico, who just people who are trustworthy, right? People who are inside the club in some way. They'll give you good, honest advice and point you in the right direction. So,
And you are right that you're representing a group that hasn't been represented before, and that's what's most important. Like we just had Rob O'Neill on the podcast, and not this past interview, but I remember the first time I interviewed him. Like some people were saying, "Why is the book The Operator?" You're saying you're the operator, and he was
right.
like, "No, this is a book for the operator, like at large, anyone
Yeah.
who's operate, whether it's Chris or." And I think that's important, man. There's how many guys who did what you did? I mean, you probably know the number.
Yeah, there's a few thousand that cycle through
So
those
your
53
book is
squadrons
yeah,
for
your
20
book is
years.
representing
Yeah.
thousands of people
You're
that
Yeah.
have
setting
never
the
been represented in a
yeah.
book.
You're setting the
Yeah.
precedence, man. This is everybody's gonna. So
Yeah.
yeah. So if you fuck up, it's on you, dude. Everybody else
Totally.
along the way.
Totally. But honestly, that's also why I wanted you have to kind of keep the number of characters, if you will, in the box. I think the first draft I had like almost 100 names in there. I ended up whittling it down to about 40. But it was important for me to use the real guys and the real names because that's also just part of capturing the history and really giving credit where it's due is the way I looked at it. Like to talk about, say, what Jay Holterman did with the longest airfield seizure in the history of the Marine Corps when they took Rhino. I knew Jay, he was senior to me and he was a guy I looked up to, but to be able to use his name, to me, it just like it's one more place that's written down for the history books. If I had to make up a name for him, it's not nearly as significant. So I was thankful that those guys were willing to do that. There was really only 3 that I couldn't get for a menagerie of reasons. But everyone else, those are the real dudes, and it was cool to be able to
Man,
include them.
I'm surprised the board, the PRB, let you put their. We had to fight to get names in there. In fact, there's 2 that still aren't not their real names, but that was the
Yeah,
board, the PR, the review board, the PRB.
yeah,
Yeah. Did you have to fight with them to get the real names in there? Or were
No,
they
it's
okay with it?
I actually had to get releases signed by everybody, and
Okay.
that made it so everyone signed a release whose name is in there, and that was what they needed, and that's what my publisher was wanted to see too. So
Cool.
you know, so that basically puts the onus on me. So if someone gets sued, it'll be my buddies suing me, I guess. But but it was cool to be able to put them in there for sure.
That's awesome.
That's
And the
cool.
book
That's
is
cool.
doing really well. I mean, I
Yeah.
looked at the Amazon charts, you know, there's certain categories that like
Yeah.
you know, there's a very specific category you're number one in, but then I think with
Yeah.
just the biographies of like or military biographies are
Yeah.
like number 4 right now. Like that's pretty cool to
No,
see.
Yeah.
and especially with, I mean, because unless you go like on Fox News or CNN or something, it's
Yeah.
hard to get that high.
It
That's
is.
excellent without going on the major media, without having Bill. No, he's not still around. Who's the main guy?
He's on some
Tucker Carlson's fired too.
but he's
Who was
not
the
even
other
he's
guy?
Yeah.
doing his he's
Yeah.
just on X. Yeah.
So
Which
Yeah.
I shouldn't say just on X because like those are
Yeah.
the big but I have seen you're doing the circuit of podcasts. You were just on our
For
friend with our
sure.
friend Jason Piccolo. Great
Yeah.
dude. So
Yeah, he was great. Yeah,
Oh.
do what I can, and obviously, you know, how far it goes will really probably depend a lot on the community too. I mean, I know the community itself has embraced it. They're excited about it. I've had so many Marines reach out to me. That's probably the coolest thing about this whole project is
That's
how many
cool.
guys I hadn't talked to in years that are pinging me on, you know, pick your social media platform, like Whiskey, what's up? Where the hell are you? This book's awesome, you know.
that's
So
got to feel
guys
good.
are excited about it. Yeah,
Well,
it's cool.
I don't know if I maybe do I, we got, I'll get you. I'll follow you on it, on everything. And
Yeah, of
if I
course.
don't already, and I'll promote as, I get shadow banned pretty good on IG. Facebook, for some reason, I don't know why they let me there. I'm okay on Facebook. And
Nice.
I just restarted an X account because I hated Twitter, but Elon has won me over, man. So
Yeah, which
so-
for the
so,
audience,
yeah.
you're
That's
at
good.
K Tonto P now. That's actually you. But for Isaac, I should say it's isaacglee.com, at
Yep.
Isaac G. Lee on X,
Yep.
at Isaac G. Lee Writer on Instagram. I don't know if Chris has anything else. I had one other question unrelated to the book, but because we started off
Yeah.
with Metallica and I'm also a Metallica fan, I figured I would ask, what do you think of the newest album, 72 Seasons?
I actually thought it was pretty good. And I will tell you, it was one of those where I listened to it like probably 4 or 5 times and kind of like, I'm not sure. About the fourth or fifth time, I decided that like 2 or 3 of the tracks were all right. And then after I saw him live those 2 nights, I was like, okay, yeah, there's 3 or 4 songs on here that are pretty good.
That's kind of how I'll be honest. That's how I feel
Yeah.
about the last few Metallica releases,
Same.
even though they're very spread apart. Like, there's at least a few songs I
Yeah.
really like. I mean, it's like it's a loosely themed concept album, how it's 72 seasons, which is
Yeah.
about the first 18 years of your life and like how that influences you. Which I will, to me, that's the best song of the album. The title track,
is.
72 Seasons.
Agree.
Like anyone who hasn't listened to that album yet, at least listen to that one song, and I think you'll be like, this is classic Metallica, super
is.
heavy. I do think I saw them do that one live. Then there's other songs that don't really do it for me. It's the same way I felt about Hardwired. But yeah, that's the thing that's amazing with them is like, go on their Wikipedia, right? And they haven't had a song that's charted in, I think, 25 years around there, and they're still
It's
on top.
amazing.
Like, it's unbelievable. There's no other band that could play football stadiums in every city in America 2 nights in a row,
Yeah.
not do the hits every night, other than maybe like Foo Fighters, who I'm not a huge
Yeah.
fan of, but they have that same fan base. But yeah, Metallica just it's you go to their shows, man, and it's like you'll see the metalheads, but you'll also see the guy who's in his 70s, and then you'll see the kid who's 13 who's just getting into this. There's something about them that just transcends this huge audience.
Totally. I did think it was cool though, the 2-night tour that just happened because I got to see
I
a few
love
songs
that.
live. I hadn't seen it forever, like Leper Messiah, Call of Cthulhu, you know, Orion live, stuff like that was awesome. And I think I'd seen those songs once or twice when I was, you know, a teenager when they were touring.
And
So
then
it's
I
cool to
also
see
love
those again.
what other band has 2 different openers on the consecutive nights, so that you're seeing different openers, different set list, and then for me, just going to one of them, like, hey, no offense, Five Finger Death Punch, but I was like, I'm going to the night Pantera's opening. That's the one I want to see.
They were good. They were
Yeah.
good too. That was a really cool show.
And did you have any whiskey? Did you have any
Of
wish?
course,
Okay,
of
I just
course.
checking. That's a if you would have said no,
course.
I would have thought a lot
Yeah.
different of you. Everything that we talked about, how highly I've held you right, would have just been came tumbling down, brother.
Yeah, on general principle, you
I
got to have
teach
at
this
least a couple.
GP, man. Hell yeah. But it's an honor, and yeah, man. I will. I'll whatever you need, I'll push out, help as best
you,
I
guys.
can, and no, you're amazing, and I love, dude. I love 53 pilots. They're just you're the biggest target in the sky, and you still have the balls to get out there and fly, and yeah, and
Yeah.
and it is, and they're just amazing. If you, I wish people could see a 53 pilots just going over your head and just at the nap of the earth. It's so inspiring. The morale just like, wow, that's us. That's America, right? It's like
Yeah.
having a fighter plane Mach 10 go right over your head, or hearing a Spectre gunship and hearing it go brrr, and like fucking America. But that's a 53 as it goes over your head. So
Yeah.
man, much respect to you, brother. Much
Hey,
respect.
thank you so much. I really appreciate you guys having me on. This was a blast.
Yeah, this really was. And for the
anytime, man.
audience, pick up Hangar 4. It's out now. It just came out this month. It's available on Amazon, everywhere else. Once again, isaacglee.com, at Isaac G. Lee on X.
Are we being catfished here though? He looks a lot better. Are you sure?
I swear that's a recent picture.
Instagram again at Isaac G. Lee writer on Instagram. And for our audience, especially if you're new here, be sure to subscribe, leave a comment, let us know what you think. All of that stuff helps. We're trying to grow the following across all platforms, and yeah, we appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you guys. Take care. Best of luck to you guys going forward too.
God bless, brother, and you're welcome anytime.
Hey,
Man.
thank you. I'll stay
Although
in
it's hard,
touch.
it's funny. Crystal say that, but it's hard to get guys.
Okay,
on, like,
anytime, but you're
in
welcome
like a year.
anytime, but you might need to wait 3 or 4 months for us to get you
Yeah,
back. But
no
anytime,
worries. Just shoot me an email.
Yeah.
Go, bud.
And I genuinely, man, like, this was a great interview, man.
Yeah.
It really was. It was perfect. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. It was a blast. You guys have a good one.
That's all for this episode of Battle Line Podcast. But we're always posting new content on social media. Follow us on Instagram at Battle Line Podcast and on Twitter at Battle Line Pod. That's an order. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any new episodes up every Tuesday. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or your podcast platform of choice. Believe in yourself. Face all challenges head on. And as always, never quit.